Hello everyone. So we have completed the phase one of our developer series, and today let's combine everything we have learned into a small capstone project. So as part of this capstone project, we'll try to build a small application which consumes, let's say, all the concept we have learned together, starting from your functional programming to the object-oriented programming, interfaces, how to create the decorators, how to have various stages, various pipelines. We also learn about a few new concepts like how to build a small web page using Flask framework and the Jinja as a template. And then we built a small chatbot kind of application where we can provide a piece of code and the application can actually execute with respect to various different, let's say, persona type and give us a result. So what we're going to build, we'll have a small page where we'll pick up few details like which template we want to use. Are you using as a code reviewer, or you are using as a developer or an architect, what role it is, and then which language the code is written. And then we have a focus area. That means the review would be based on the security in mind, performance in mind, or let's say documentation in mind, and will provide some piece of code. So when you run the prompt, the system will take all those input, analyze the code, and then give us the output. In the output also we'll see what are the system prompt that is created based on the input we have provided, and then it will also return as a LLM response from the OpenAI, and then it will also tell us how much time it took to execute it. Okay, so again, we learn everything except how to create a web page in a Python application, right? So we have created, let's say, the console applications. We have created, let's say, the packages. So today we learn about how to create a small website where we have a code behind file, we have a template, and how to both combine together, and how can you browse it in a website, right? So there is two different parts to it. First part is the let's say templating engine, which is Ginger, so which provide us a syntax like in the C Sharp we have the razor templates. How do we have to our ASP.NET template files are there where you can provide the let's say how do you print a variable, how can you pass variable from a backend to a front end, how to bind it in a UI. And then we have Flask as a web framework, which is something to similar to our ASP.NET let's say MVC or core ASP.NET core web framework, which actually use razor as a template engine, and then the C Sharp code behind can bind with the razor template engine to show a web page. So in the Python that would be Flask as a web framework, then Jinja as a template engine, and how the Python code behind and bind to the Jinja template will create a web page. So then also we have learned before how can you make a HTTP request. Here we will use the OpenAI packages to make HTTP request to OpenAI. Also we'll see how the request from browser is routed back to the server side, how the get request work, how the post request work, and how can we create a complete web page. Okay, so again, to reiterate, these are all the concepts that we have learned before, be it error handling in the lesson 4. We have the file IO, how to read the environment variable. We have learned about the data classes. We have learned about the object oriented programming, abstract classes. We have also learned about the lambdas and decorator. We try to use most of the concept here today in the Capstone project, so we can see whatever you learn, how to put it into action. Okay, so now coming back to few, let's say spend 5-10 minutes on understanding the Jinja template, and then we go to Visual Studio, try out few simple, let's say web application before we go for the Capstone project. Okay, so again, every request is originating from a web browser. So when web browser will submit the particular form with all the detail, so detail will be sent back to the code behind, where the Flask web framework will read the request, then it will actually pass those to LLM pipeline, which will execute via LLM post API, and then it will get the response. The response again will come back, will bind it to a Jinja template, and it will be visible on the website. See, this is almost similar to how your ASP.NET core pipeline works, where any request got routed to a controller to any service, and you get the response. Then the controller will return the model to a view, and in the razor template it will get binded, and the response will be displayed on the website. Okay, so this is how our project structure will look like. We'll create, let's say, various classes. We'll use all the concept we've tried to use before. I am try to incorporate so that we can have a basic understanding and put them into action. So with this, let's jump back to Visual Studio. We'll first learn into a few simple application using Flask and the Jinja template, and then we see how can we build the Capstone project. Okay, So I built already the Capstone project. So we'll go through the application first, and let's first start with the basic Flask application. How can you run it in a website? For example, we have, let's say, the Flask package we need to install. Again, I'll attach all the source code, everything to my blog. You can download and run it and verify. So from the Flask package, we'll import the Flask, let's say the functionality, or this is a Flask class. So then we have to create a object of a type Flask, which is an application object. So using this, the Flask application would be instantiated, and then whenever we want to define how do my, let's say, request URL or route will look like, we can define using the app.route. So then we can provide what path it is. Default slash is a home page. That means when you browse the page, it will actually run it under the home. The default path is a slash, right? So this application, there is no template. I just want to have a simple web application which will run, and then when it will open the browser, it will match the default route, which actually just print a home page, hello world as a text on the browser. So again, so here I'm using the command, let's say the convention of the name. If I check, I directly run this app basic flask.py file. The name would be main, so it should run. Here I've created a parameter debug equal to true. Now app run support a lot of parameter. If you want to customize which port it needs to run, those things also you can customize, but by default it will run on the port 5000. So let's run the particular file. I'll run the app_basic and flask.py. Okay, so if I run this application, it will start a web browser, and this is because we have started the Flask application and we run the particular application. Whenever we run the Flask application, it will run as a website, and it will run default port is 5000. You will try to open in this particular port. So I've enabled debug equal to true, so we can see the debug mode is active with a debugger pin. Maybe later sometime we'll see what is the use of the debugger pin and how it is helpful for us to debug on the live site. Okay, so if I just browse the particular application, that it will let's say map to the default path, which is slash, and then since you are returning a world, hello world, so hello world is getting printed on the browser. Okay, so now let's go to the next step, and I want to create a simple Jinja template where I want to create, let's say, model. Now this application is almost similar to the previous application where I have defined a Flask let's say application, and also similarly default home route. But here I've done instead of responding with a simple text, I created a model with two property, title and a message. Then I call the method render template. Again, render template is a method available in the Flask package, and in the render template we can provide what is the file name or the template file name, and we pass the model what is the data model as an input. Okay, so whenever we pass, let's say, file name as a template, then it will always looks for a folder called templates. Within the templates folder, you look for a file with a similar exact same name. For example, example2.home_home. So here you see I have already binded the two property, so model.title and model.message. So the way we do the data binding in the Jinja template would be double curly bracket. Using that, we can bind the data to the model. Right. So now if I run this page, it should actually show me a web page with all the detail, the binded data with a, let's say, browser with a title as a header, then the body with h1 as a message. Okay. So let's run the application and verify. Okay. I run the application again. So here also exactly same way we have run the application with the debug mode equal to true. So debug is not always required, but I'll suggest during the development time we say debug equal to true. So now we see the title is written home page and the message is getting printed welcome to the home page, and with the title which was the static text on the template. For example, if I go and change the template, let's say just put let's say project 1, and I save the particular file, and I come back here and refresh the page. Okay, so we see that text got added. So this is how we can bind our, let's say, code behind. Again, just to iterate, so we have a code behind model which has got certain properties. Now whenever we pass the model to the render template and we pass what is the template file, then this model is being passed as a model parameter. Okay, so then we come to the particular file, and then we can assign the value as model dot the property name, right? So yeah. So that's all about how can you use a Flask application, how can you use a Jinja template, how to bind the model to the web UI to show the result. So now let's next we go for our Capstone project. Let me first I'll first run the project and then we see the project output. Then we go through the detailed file one by one. Okay, so all the files for this Capstone project is defined within the starting up file is the app.py. In the app.py, I've defined again similar Flash application. Then we'll go through all the code, but I've defined two root here. One is the default root, which is a slash, and again this is a get root, and I'm creating one model and to bind to the home.html. Similarly, I've created a post root. Wherever I want to post the data, it will come to slash generate. Then here I'm read the data from the web request, let's say request.form and all the properties, and then I create a prompt model, then call the pipeline to execute, which will actually call the LLM API to get the response. I'll bind the response and show it on the UI. Now since this is a get request, since this is a post request, I created a get equivalent of the generate and I just redirect back to the home page. Okay, again, so here also I'm running as a debug mode, but I've specified port as 5001. So let's run this application. We see the behavior first and then we go for the code. Okay, let's fire 500 and use. So let me change to, let's say, 5002. Okay, so now application is running on 5002. Now if we see it here, let me zoom out a bit. Okay, so this particular application, if you see, we have two different parts. First part is request detail, where I have a different template available. Let's say, are you a code reviewer or a summarizer or a translator? Then let's say I'll pass as a what role you are reviewing the code, as a developer, a reviewer, software engineer, team lead, or architect. Similarly, the language of the source code. Then I want to say, whenever you review it, what is in your mind? Do you want to have a security, performance, readability, maintainability, documentation? What is on your mind? On those things, it will actually take the input of the code and do the analyze. So let's do, I want to pass one simple code and I will just call our post method. I'll take this code and I will pass it here. And I'll say, let's say, performance point of view, as a team lead, you review the code and give me the response. Okay, so let it run the application. It will take few seconds to actually call the OpenAI, pass the code, generate the prompt, then give us a response out, which actually look into this particular code, identify what are the different performance implications are there. Okay, so now in the response, we see there are two different parts are there. First part is the prompt. So after putting all the data together, what is the final prompt generated? So again, always in a, let's say LLM, or whenever making call to any LLM API, you need to be ensure the prompt is correct, because all the response will depend on what exactly is your prompt. Okay, so here I put, let's say you are a team lead for a solution software development team. Again, the team lead has been taken from the role. Then you will be given a piece of code and you need to provide a detailed review of the code targeting focus area is performance, because focus area I have selected the performance. Then I pass the code block there. Okay, and finally what language it is, I'll just specify. So based on this, LLM did analyze the code and provided its response. Let's say it's in the repeated calls to the request.form, we're reading multiple time request.form dot, okay, so request.form prompt type, request.form language. So it's saying better to assign to a variable and read directly from the variable. So this is how our API can analyze the piece of code and give us a response. For example, let's say I want to have, let's say, summarizer, okay, which actually summarize what exactly this piece of code is doing. Again, for the documentation purpose, for a, let's say, architect, how do he will summarize again. So let's read the wait it for the API to response. Okay, see. Now, what is a response from the API? It's this is a Python Flask root handler, define generate endpoint, just process post request to generate the AI response based on the user prompt. Okay, so now you see the same code, but since the prompt is different, it gives us a different response. So prompt engineering is core before even we start writing any LLM APIs. You need to understand what is the prompt you need to create so that you can get the right response. Okay, so this is all about our Capstone project. Now we'll go into deep into the different sections of the project. What are the different concepts I have learned? I'll try to also specify what was the concept I applied here, so it'll be easier for our understanding. Okay, so let's start the application from the app.py, because this is the starting point, and then from there we'll go into deep. Okay, so let's go to the top. So again, first of all, we have defined all the, let's say, the OpenAI key, the base URL, the model in the environment file. And as you have learned before, I'm using the .env package to load the environment file into application. Right. So then also, since we are running a Flask application, from the Flask, I have imported the Flask application and the render template. And also, since we are redirecting from the generate get UI, get API to default homepage, so I have the redirect. So request not in use, oh sorry, request also we are using the request form when it's get binded whenever we post the data, it will get binded to the request. Now I have created so many model classes here. If I open the models, there are two set of model and all are using the data classes, because I don't have, these are just pure data place data holders. I don't want to define any behavior here. So one is, let's say, AI response data class, one is having the small prompt as a data class. Similarly, I have created a prompt model as a data class, where actually what are the default data we see, different sources are there, what are different focus lists, what are the different languages we want to support, what are the different roles are there, all those things will be defined in the prompt form model. Similarly, I have defined all other data classes, right? So let's go back here. So this is how we have load all the required data classes here. So then load.env read the environment file, and then let's say Flask application is just a standard. So it actually runs, create a Flask application which later will be running. Right. So then I have created a pipelines manager register pipeline. So now let's look into the pipeline. What does it do and what concept we want to implement here in the pipeline manager. So pipeline manager is part of, let's say, if we see here. Okay, so from the service package, I'm loading the pipeline manager and the prompt manager. So let's first look into the pipeline manager. So now if you remember, any folder in a Python is a package until unless they have the underscore init underscore dot py. So this is the, let's say, entry point to the package. Here we can define what are the publicly available API or the methods that will be visible to the whoever is consuming the package. So here I've defined one variable pipeline manager, and then other let's say the classes others have specified here as a all, and all means it's the public APIs which can be visible whoever is accessing this particular package. Now if I go to the pipeline manager, here I've created a normal class. It's not a data class because I want to have a certain behavior, and also I've created this as a singleton class. So now if you remember different types of class methods we have discussed before, so here I've used the class method. That means this is kind of a static application, static variable within the project, and then whenever how many instance will create of the pipeline manager, it will be accessible to everyone. So first thing, I want to create a list of pipeline. Now pipeline is also a class I have defined, which is a interface or the abstract class, right? So and then here I have defined one method called run, which accept the prompt model, and it will also return a boolean parameter. It will also accept the prompt response model, which will get enriched whenever we'll execute this particular pipeline. So I've created two implementation of this particular pipeline. One is called validator pipeline, one is called the LLM response pipeline. Now validator pipeline will just verify the input. If some input is not there, it will just return a error code. Again, similarly, if I go back to the LLM response pipeline, which actually make a call to LLM client and then make a call to the OpenAI to get the response. So what I'm doing first, whenever application is loading, I'm registering the pipeline. If you see the register pipeline, I'm registering both the validator pipeline and the LLM response pipeline. So then I have a execute pipeline which actually go in a loop and execute for every request, first validate and then LLM response. So that's what this particular let's say for loop is doing. So here I've also handled the exception in case this particular OpenAI throwing error or any other exception occurs. So I'll handle and response back as a failure to the let's say whoever is calling. So coming back to arm.py, so this is how I'm loading, registering all the pipelines. So now I want to also demonstrate how to read the files data. So here I've created, let's say under content folder, LLM prompts. So I've created three simple object or dictionary, which is let's say name and the respective prompt with certain placeholders. Right. As a code reviewer, what is the prompt? As a summarizer, what is the prompt? As a translator, what is the prompt we are going to use? So as part of the app.py start, I'm reading all the prompt and storing it as part of a list prompt in the prompt manager. Okay. So now whenever I browse the particular application, by default, I create a prompt form model, which all the variables by default is loaded here with the default values. But here I'm also loading all the get all prompt, which actually deserializing the JSON object from the LLM prompt, read all the value and give me back the name as a individual parameter again. So here I'm using the list comprehension. How do you read the data from the list and create a comprehension of the name? Okay. So then I bind those to create a home model, page model with a prompt form as a model, and prompt response is by default I kept is none because this is just a get method, there is no response, and I send it back to the home template. Again, home template, if I see, it will be bit larger, but yeah, so it's almost similar. I want to bind, let's say, model dot messages. So then let's say let's see the request part. So here we see I'm looking through all the prompt types and listing as a select variable as a drop down. Similarly, I'm looking through all the roles and then languages, and then let's say this is just a code block placeholder as a text area. Then with a button, I'll submit the request to the form. This is very standard HTML template with Jinja as a placeholder we need to understand. But if you know the very basic HTML, this is purely HTTP post request to the generate endpoint. Now, if I go to the generate endpoint, it actually reads all the submitted data from a request.form, let's say variable, and this is also a form dictionary. We say from the dictionary it reads all the value, create the respective request model, and then it create a prompt model by reading all the prompt and reading all the code from the request model, and then it execute the pipeline. Right. So the execute pipeline, again, as discussed before, it goes through all the pipeline for every request. First, it will validate, then it will execute the LLM response. So for example, let's say I don't pass any value. Okay, so then if I run the prompt, it will immediate. Okay, I think stop. Let me run the application again. Okay, so let's say I don't pass any value and I just run the prompt, it will fail in the validator pipeline, then it will stop execution. So that's how we can actually add more behavior. So we can also create, let's say, I want you to try creating more pipelines and then add it to, let's say, this pipeline, register pipeline. Then you can change the behavior without changing any of the code. And since both are part of the means implementing the same abstract class, then application will compile just fine. You have to follow the signature how it's defined in the respective interfaces. Okay, yeah, so that's pretty much all. I think we've gone through the LLM prompt, client, and all the class method. This is very simple. This may not be the most efficient way we can make a application, but I will try to implement all the concept that we've learned in the phase one into this application Capstone project, so that we can see whatever we've learned, how to put them into action and see the benefit we are doing, be it pipeline, be it data classes, be it the list comprehension, or be it, let's say, the packages, how to, let's say, show particular, let's say, how to expose certain methods, part of the packages. Then also we have learned today how to use the Flash application, how to use the Jinja template, how to define the particular template, bind the data to the web UI, how to display. Again, all the code I'll just add and upload to the TechWebFit website, and make sure to visit there and download the application and try it on your own. Try to modify the code, try to add new pipeline or change, play with the HTMLs and make it more production ready. Okay, so that's pretty much all for today. We have looked into review of all the application, all the code. We have, let's say, every concept that we've learned before we try to incorporate in this particular application. We also learn about the Flask. We also learn about the Jinja. So that in upcoming new lessons that we'll go through, we'll try to use more of the Flask and the Jinja templates so that we can see more visually appealing demos. Everything we covered today, including the scripts, configuration, and extended documentation, is available right now on techwebhit.com. While you are there, check out our deep dives into enterprise security and design principles, or put your skills to test with our developer focused quizzes. Hit subscribe to stay in the loop, and I'll see you in the next lesson.